Buddy, and welcome to FormIt Friday, or I should say FormIt Thursday. Sorry for the confusion, but we had some conflicts on Friday, so we had to switch it to Thursday. Probably should have renamed it the webinar, but didn't have the same ring to it. So sorry for the confusion. We'll try to keep them to Fridays if that works for people moving forward. So as usual, I'm Tom Villaro, the product manager for FormIt 360, and I'm joined by Tobias Hathorn.
Good morning, everyone.
Who's fresh back from San Francisco. So how are things out there?
It was awesome. San Francisco is really beautiful right now, and Colorado, Boulder is rainy like you wouldn't believe right now.
Yeah, it's kind of dreary here too in the Boston area. But we have some fun stuff to go through, and so we're going to talk a bit about the kind of overall kind of value proposition, as we call it, for FormIt 360. So we get this question a lot, which is, well, how is this different from something that I'm used before, like SketchUp? So we're going to go through kind of step by step what those major differences are. Might be a review for a lot of you, but it's something that you can take back to people that you know, colleagues that you work with that may have this question, and I think some of this material can help you when they ask that question. We're also going to be giving you a sneak peek at the new version, which we are preparing to launch very, very soon, next week. Is that right, Tobias?
Yeah, we're going through the process of submitting the app to the Apple App Store, and then they take about a week to review it, and then we're able to push it all live. So you're right on next week.
Okay, great. So just be aware that it will take a few days before you log in to see the changes that we're going to be showing. Okay, so let me switch over. For fun, I was in well, actually for work, I was in Chicago about last month, but I love Chicago, and I was having a good time, and was visiting some customers there, and we were right across the street from the Marina Tower project, and one of the guys I was with said, "Yeah, and we should see if we could do that in FormIt." So of course, plane ride home, I started kind of modeling out the basic form of that. And so that's kind of the first thing, which is and from day one, which has been the critical thing about FormIt, is that, I'm in my browser right now, but, as everybody knows, you can run this on iPad and Android, and it's really handy just to be able to kind of do some really quick ideas. I brought the satellite image in, kind of sketched out the basic massing of the sort of cylindrical form just to kind of get an idea of the scale of this project, before I kind of got into the detail. So I guess that's step one, is that the mobile aspect, and then coming back to home, and then being on just popping up my web browser, or whether I'm at home or the office, and being able to pull this data up or this project up immediately is a huge kind of step forward in terms of how we think about and access our design work. So the second thing is, and we've had this also from day one, and this one is always a big win when I show this to SketchUp users in particular, is that we have level datums that allow you to do gross area tracking in FormIt 360. And this is kind of a simple thing, but it's pretty significant for people who have done these types of projects where you've modeled everything in a kind of polygonal modeler, and then you've got to go through and trace over each floor plate and measure them, and that would be particularly problematic with kind of a curved project like this. It's just nice to be able to do a quick gut check on the gross area of the project, make sure that you're within a target. Let's say it's 1,000,000 square feet. You can start to keep track of how this project is progressing in terms of area usage. And then, of course, when we'll talk a little bit more detail in a little bit, but then these level datums also transfer into Revit. So, this is, it's always a big win when I show this to SketchUp users because they say, oh man, just the other day I was doing this area takeoffs from a SketchUp model, and it was such a pain. So this one's always a nice one to kind of show people as a way of doing things a little bit smarter and a little bit faster. So I'll just remind everybody that you can put questions in the question pane, and you can also, I see Cal's raising his hand. So you guys use the question pane to put questions in the for us, and Tobias will take those and we'll address them as we go. And we should have some time in the end here for questions. This presentation shouldn't take the whole time.
And Eagle Eyes Cal was pointing out that we need to add a comma separator there in the gross area total, so it's a little more legible.
Oh, right, and consistent with the target area. Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Good point. Okay, so before I skip over to kind of talking about some of the Revit aspects, I mean, we can talk a little bit about some of the differences in terms of modeling as well, and also a reminder about what you get from the Pro subscription. So this is another thing I wanted to reinforce because it does present some confusion, is that FormIt is a freemium, what we call a freemium product. So everything, most of what you're seeing here, you can use for free, whether it's on the web or on iOS or Android. But there is a separate subscription that you can purchase, and that will enable additional features inside the product. So think of it like in-app purchases. So there is no separate product that's FormIt 360 Pro per se. It's features that we light up inside the product. So let's talk about some of those first, just to kind of differentiate between what's free and what's pro. So the first thing is that is this collaborative aspect. So right now, I've shared this model with Tobias, and you'll see that he's in this session, and we can work in real time together. So Tobias, you can make some, if you want to kind of make some changes or maybe model something off to the side. I wanted to show the face push through too as a differentiator. So if you want to kind of make something that we can.
You bet.
So it's a little hard to see when you're on the webinar, but my hands are off my mouse right now. So this greenish area, that model that you see in the bottom right, is actually Tobias working in the model at the same time. So his selection color is green. Now I'm going to go back and select this top cylinder and my selection color is orange. So we're actually selecting different objects in the scene at the same time. I can even select the object that Tobias is working on as well. So there's absolutely no locking. We like to call it the anti-work set style. It's there's absolutely no locking. Now this can create problems. If you got more than maybe 3 or so people in the scene, you got to be careful about who's modeling what. But just from a technical aspect, there's no locking. So Tobias is kind of modeling the site context, and I can do the same over here. So this is actually a good use case for this, is that if you want to just kind of quickly build out the site context, a bunch of people can be in the model, and it's like you take the western side, I'll take the eastern side, and we'll get this site model modeled up in about 10 minutes. So which is a nice way of doing this, and also presents very few conflicts, right? Because we're both just modeling individual buildings. So the other cool thing about the collaboration system is you can follow somebody's camera, and this is oops, we got a conflict there. Let's see. So if you want to give someone a tour of the design, I can click on Tobias's camera. Now my hands once again are off the mouse, and Tobias is I'm following his camera. So if you move your camera around, um,
Yeah, I'm moving around right now. Can you see it?
yeah. Well, I'm down
Cool.
on the street level now.
Okay, yep.
Okay.
And now kind of coming up. And one thing I like about this mode too is that I can select things, but you can also select things and work. Basically, it's just your camera that is following mine. Everything else is still operational.
Right. So I'll take the camera back for myself. Yeah, so this is nice if you want to give somebody a little a tour or give them a preview. And one request that we've gotten is to make a quote client view, which is a viewer only, which takes away the toolbar. That way you could send the link to a client and then have them view your camera but not edit anything. So that's something we're looking at. We've gotten that request quite a bit. Um, Okay, so back to just a sidebar. I skipped over this before. So one of the things that, from a modeling aspect, that's different about FormIt and the way we can interact with surfaces and faces are that you're able to push through geometry all the way through an object when you're pushing and pulling. So Tobias, you want to um, demonstrate? Yeah, demonstrate that. I'll zoom in there and you can demonstrate that. Okay, so if I want to cut a hole through this part and push it all the way through, I'm able to push that through. In SketchUp, I would get stopped at this surface, and I wouldn't be able to push it all the way through. So that's kind of a nice little addition to how we can model.
Yeah, and that'll push through the entire body, so it's pretty interesting that you could even have that push through and keep pushing through if it were extended further too.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Which is pretty powerful. I see a question on here from Craig asking, can you import context models, i.e. city models, into the work environment? And the answer is absolutely yes. I meant to bring an InfraWorks model of Chicago into this for this demo, but I ran into some problems getting access to the model. So, but you can bring context models in through this point through either our OBJ or STL import feature, which is right here, import 3D model. So if you can export an OBJ file, you'll get you'll be able to bring that in, and if you do it with SAT, you can use the iPad app to bring in SAT files as well. Another common question we get is, can you bring in DWG? And the answer right now is no, technically, though. I did a blog post a couple weeks ago showing a couple different ways you can do this if you have AutoCAD. I'll paste this into the chat window and you guys can take a look at it. Okay. Okay, so continuing talking about the pro aspect, the other thing we have in the pro offering are solar analysis that you can do. So for free, you get this shadow analysis, which is very accurate and tied to the location that I've set, which is downtown Chicago. And if you go to the settings menu here, you can go to visual style. You can turn on the north arrow, and that gives you a little north arrow down the bottom. But I can also, if I have the pro subscription, I can click solar analysis, it's going to download a weather data file in the background for me. Which this is usually faster than this. I don't know, could this be because I'm on the staging site?
Yeah, it's possible. I'd have to take a look at that one.
Okay, well, we will come back to that part. Not sure what's going on there. Usually this takes about a second. You very rarely even see this window come up. It's so fast. Maybe because I'm on a development build. All right, or it could be in collaboration. So let me.
That's a good point too. Yeah, in a collaboration session.
All right. So let me switch over to talking a little bit more about the detail aspect, and I can also give a couple
Wow, that looks great.
previews. Thank you. And this is, not really possible without radial arrays and groups, which we've added over the past couple of releases. So what I did is I've kind of gone up the next level of detail. So I've kind of gotten a basic idea of the overall massing. And the next thing I want to do is start to, imagining it's back in 1964 and I'm designing this for the first time. I want to kind of explore what the overall sort of form of how this would look with all these units kind of arrayed. So I won't go through in detail because we've covered this before, but basically what I did is created a single unit, grouped it, and then arrayed it with the radial array, and then copied with the linear array, copied it vertically. So I get, immediately get copies that will all respect the parent-child relationship unless I choose to make them unique. So I can get down in here, even down to this, this level here, and start looking at this. I think I have. I'm looking at the kind of the shadow impacts on all these different balconies. And then if I go in and double click to edit this group, so I can edit all of these balconies and have them update at once if I want to take these down, make them slightly smaller.
And Cal, thank you for all the questions today. This is great. Had another question about turning off HD settings. So I'm not 100% sure what you mean there, Cal. Is that on Macs? Do we turn off the HD setting, or on
Might be this.
On the visual style? Yeah. And Truls was asking any way to create shells using a defined thickness, like all walls at 300 millimeters. And we do have a handy tool called Offset Face, which is probably the best way to do that in the software today. So you can select any face, right-click on it, and then choose Offset, and you can specify a value. And then once you have the offset done, you can push that down and through to create walls. Is that how you created those walls, Tom?
Yeah, exactly. That's a great segue.
Yeah, totally.
Let me get my zoom back here. So yeah, that's exactly how I made these, pseudo walls. Is I'm in this group, and if you right click on any face, you choose this offset tool or do OF keyboard shortcut, and then you press Tab to set a specific value for that offset. And what's cool, you'll notice, since I have these grouped, I can push those all down at once. So that kind of gives you a quick kind of pseudo wall. And we're actually working on a kind of a more robust shelling command as well. So just to kind of continue on this kind of level of detail. So you could kind of see that model that I did with the 47 floors and 15 units and all these balconies started to stress out the performance a little bit. So like we said, the layers can help that, but then also sort of creating separate files depending on the type of level of detail that you want. So in this file, once again using the layers, I've kind of set up. I kind of have the core and the parking and the other units kind of more very low level of detail as this kind of diagram, and then I have a typical floor here in more detail. And now once I've shelled this out a little bit, we can get down to the next level of detail, which is adding some actual interior elements to this. So what I did here is I used our content library feature. Now with the content library, we can take any AXM file, which is a FormIt file format, and we can load them as pieces of distinct content. But there's a workflow around this where we have a add-in for Revit. So if you're not familiar with this, if you go to to our website, formit360autodesk.com, and click download, we have a converter that runs inside Revit. And I'll switch over to my Revit view in a minute. And what that allows you to do is convert a bunch of family files and make them available to be loaded into the FormIt project using this content library. You can also convert SketchUp files as well. So if you download some furniture, some elements from, like, let's say the SketchUp warehouse, you can also convert them into FormIt content, which can be loaded using this content library. So all you have to do is click and then place, and this number is if these were converted from Revit family that had individual types, it'll actually, each one of these is an individual file, but it allows you to choose the type that you want. And what you get, what's interesting about this is it isn't just placing the geometry. I mean, it is placing the geometry so you can visualize it, but what you're getting here is a group. And if I double click on it, I'm going to get this warning saying you're editing content created in Revit. Any changes will be lost when converting back to the original Revit family. So I can, kind of, change the geometry in this sofa. But what that message is telling me is that when I actually go back to convert this back to a real family in Revit, any of those changes will be lost. But that's okay because we're thinking of this as a placeholder. So you can imagine that the way you could use this is that giving this tool to designers who are maybe not familiar with Revit or don't have access to Revit, they could place a bunch of content, do kind of a rough fit out, but then we have the ability to hold on to this family's metadata. So you'll see here, here's the name of the family. It's going to match that name back to a real family file when we rerun this conversion in Revit, which I'll show you. So it's a pretty powerful way of giving people access to content that's a little bit smarter than just a bunch of faces. It's actually has some metadata tied back to that Revit content. So okay, so now that I've placed that, and what I'm going to do is do a little easy bake oven here and switch back over to my Revit view. I've already converted this. So Tobias, let me know when you see my Revit screen.
Okay, yep, it just showed up.
Okay, great. So just to kind of recap how you get files from FormIt into Revit, there's two ways, and this does create some confusion sometimes, so it's worth going over. The first thing is that try to think of Revit as essentially a native file format for FormIt. So it's not really technically, but you don't have to do an export. You don't have to even save as. Every time you save your FormIt file, it saves to this AXM file format, and then you also automatically get a Revit file in the same folder inside your A360 drive, inside the FormIt folder. So you always get these kind of two files every time you save. The Revit file takes a little bit longer, may take a few minutes to generate, because what happens is the we have a service that takes each AXM file, looks at it, and goes through the entire file, takes each object and says, can I create a Revit mask from this? Yes, create a Revit mask. Can I not because something was Booleaned? Well, we'll import this instead for you. And then what you get is you get an entire Revit project file with all of the levels that you created, and the location's even set, so these shadows are still accurate. So if I go into the location window, you'll still see Chicago here. So and anywhere where you applied levels in the FormIt file, you'll get mass floors on the Revit side. So we could even do a mass floor schedule and do a little bit deeper dive into the area analysis that we started in FormIt. The other good thing that's distinct from other competitors is, well, first of all, most of you already know, and it's something we hear about almost every office we visit. If you just go up to Revit and do open, no, sorry, it's insert CAD and then choose SketchUp, you're just going to get a big blob that you can't do anything with. But this entire Revit file created from FormIt instead is segmented like I described. So we've got this cylinder is a Revit mass with all the mass floors applied. This core, which I didn't have levels applied to, does not have mass floors. But you'll also notice that this is a smooth, real cylinder. So versus a lot of curved elements you get from other products that you import into Revit will all be faceted. So if I go in and I double click this to edit it, you're going to see that it's a Revit mass. Oh, I think because I have it open already. Let me just switch over there. Yeah, so this is a Revit mass that I can edit its profile. I can push and pull its profile. Do all the different things you can do on a Revit mass. So if I switch over back to the project, that's a different one I was messing with. I'm going the wrong direction with my tabs. Okay, these white objects are all Revit masses, Revit mass families. And the other critical thing here is that I arrayed these 15 times. These arrayed objects are all mass instances. They are not individual blobs of geometry. These are actually mass instances of a family that's been created called penthouse units, because that's what I named the group in FormIt. Now these darker gray areas, this is stuff that, because I did that shelling operation and pushed that floor down and not all the way through, Revit can't create a conceptual mass from this. So you're going to get an imported set of geometry, which is fine. It's just as a reference, but it's just to be clear, that's how things get segmented. So you can still use this as a reference. So if I want to say curtain, create a curtain system on this, and do kind of curtain system or wall by face to start adding some detail to this project. I could also, start to add walls, although I'm not sure what level I'm on here. Back to Cal's question, we don't, let's see. so we can start adding detail elements into this. Um, so the last bit I want to run through.
Tom, that looks great, by the way. I don't know what platform are you using?
Um, what do you mean in terms of Revit?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this is just Revit Architecture 2016.
Oh, okay, but what are you running on a desktop or are you running on a tablet?
No, this is on my Lenovo laptop, tablet
Okay,
hybrid. Yeah, so it's Windows 10 and Revit 2016.
awesome.
Let me turn off Slack here.
Oh, that's great. I was noticing that, and just so everybody knows how agile our team is, we
Yeah.
uh, we filed a couple of bugs that we saw here this morning. So this
Oh,
is
is that?
great. We're already getting those fixed. Yeah.
That's great. I wasn't actually looking at the messages so that's good.
Yep.
So you're in the background there filing bugs as we go. That's great. Um, okay, so the last bit is just to kind of talk about how to convert these back. So if you remember, I placed these from my content library, these furniture elements, and what I get from them is uh, an actual furniture family called FormIt 360 Group Table Dining Oval. So if I edit this, what you're going to see is instead of a mass family, is it's an actual furniture family created from the or from the family editor tool. So these are sort of straight up extrusions. Now they're not it's not a fully constrained family, so it's just the geometry kind of brought in. But there's an interesting case we can talk about, which is you could use FormIt to sort of rough out a family, bring it in this way, and then add constraints later. But what I want to show is I went the wrong way again. In our add-in that I showed you that you can download, we added a feature that, oops, let's see. This is the FormIt 360 converter, and you can. What I did earlier is I downloaded the AXM file and I said convert this FormIt 360 sketch to Revit. So what this does is it does basically the same thing that the cloud conversion does for you, but the one advantage here is that you could bring it into your own template. So I won't do this right now. It'll take a few minutes depending on the size of the file. You got to wait for it to go through and analyze and convert each object. But once you've done that, you can go back to the add-in and then you can say reload families. And I'm just going to paste in, or you can browse to, and now if you browse to the exact folder where you converted those Revit families from and say OK, now it's going to convert from 2015 to 2016. While this converts, it gives me an opportunity to tell you, yes, a 2016 version of the converter is coming soon. We have it all ready to go. We ran into some problems with the installer. Um, so what that now gives us, you notice, like for instance, these chairs turned yellow because it went out and it swapped in the actual family, the original family. So now you've got the real family content in there. So, like I said, you can imagine there's a workflow here where you could um, give FormIt to somebody who doesn't have Revit or isn't familiar with Revit, allow them to do something like an interior fit out such as this, or add some other detail elements, and then bring that back into Revit and convert it, and then be able to keep working in terms of adding that level of BIM detail. So I didn't anticipate it, but I did use up most of the time. I guess there is quite a lot to get to. Um, let's take the last 6 minutes and do questions.
Let's see. Yeah, it looked like you just addressed the 2016 update. That's probably the biggest question that I've seen on the forums as well, is getting that available for people. So that'll be exciting. It should be coming soon.
Yeah, we're waiting on some assistance from Microsoft because there's an issue with some of the core technologies that are used in the installer.
Mm-hmm. And I had another question about materials when you were talking about that, whether you can create your own custom materials and apply your own custom bitmap textures to those. And yes, you can do that. That's been in there for a little bit, and it's still available. So I don't know if you want to show that, Tom, in the app, because I started to write out the answer, and it was like edit the material, then edit the bitmap, then click the button, and it's 2 or 3 steps down there, but you can create your own custom material textures.
Okay. Yeah, so if I wanted to, let's see if I have some bitmaps available handy here. So let me edit this group. And it's important to remember that all materials are assigned by group. So it's important for managing materials and scenes and layers, and also converting to Revit, to name your groups. It just makes things a lot easier. So when you are editing a group, if you go up to the properties here and click here, you can name the group. This makes things a lot easier. And then once you're in materials and you say add material, and then you choose the texture, and then say load image from file. Let's see. I think we have some in here. Like, let's just choose this one. Okay, so then once you're in here, you can now crop this, and you can also define the height of this. So I'm going to say, I know my facade, or the unit is 8 feet 6 inches high. I can also take these gray lines and crop them, and then I can reset. Once I crop, I can reset that height. And now this kind of gives you a tiling preview, and I say okay. This will give you kind of a preview of what it's going to look like. I can kind of bump up the glossiness or reflectivity. I can also layer color on top here. So I mean, if I want to add a tint to this, I can do that. It'll blend the texture map and the color. And then once you have that defined, just click the paintbrush, and you can either double click to assign the material to, oops, that didn't work. Single click to assign to paint the material onto a face. And then you can go back and edit that later as well if you want to change the crop to make it work a little bit better. So that's how you would do custom materials.
That's great. So Cal was requesting a recap of the views workflow, the scenes workflow again.
Sure.
And he did use the magic word, please.
Okay, so yeah, I have these all set up. Let's just say I want to save the viewpoint that I'm in right now, and let's say I change I'm going to change the visual style to like display hidden lines, and my Chrome has been a little bit sluggish. I think because I loaded that huge file.
Yeah, I bet.
And then I add scene. So the scene is this little camera icon in the palette. click Add Scene, double click to rename it. I'll call this balcony. And then if I navigate away and then I want to go back there, I can do that. And what's cool is like if I'm in, like I said, it respects visual style. So if I have that visual style turned off in the main, or is that gonna update the? No, not unless I click update, right? So now if I go back to that scene, you'll see the visual style is reapplied. Now, if I want to turn that visual style off or change something, let's say I want to turn on extended edges, but turn off hidden line, and then I want to update this scene, I just click this little recycle button, and let's go back to balcony. That visual style is now applied. So, and if I want to say, well, okay, don't respect visual styles, I can just check that off. And the next time I go back to balcony, it'll only apply the visual style that's on the parent scene. Okay, so any other? We're out of time, so we might have to take questions off. I just want to remind you that if you want AIA Learning Unit credit, there's a survey that'll pop up when you get out of the webinar. I'll submit those, and you can get credit for that. And otherwise, please shoot us questions in our forum, and and let us know how you're using FormIt. We're always curious to see projects, no matter how small or how big, or and then let us know what we can do to enhance the product.
Super, and thanks everybody for the questions. There were a lot of good ones this week. Really appreciate the dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't have the next episode scheduled yet. We're kind of in the crunch getting this release out, but stay tuned. I kind of set up an email list based on people that have registered in the past, so I'll send out an email next time we have one scheduled, or you can follow us on Twitter at FormIt360. All right, thanks everybody, and have a great weekend.